What's going on, my friend? It's Jeff Newport from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are covering number 4 in our top 10 list of fat loss mistakes people make using kettlebells. And today is ignoring EP. What is EP? Well, let's dive in and take a closer look. Now, look, unfortunately, a lot of people just go through the motions with their fat loss workouts, with fat loss programming, right? So they show up, they punch the clock, and they hope that it's enough. But the ugly truth is, right, and as I mentioned in an earlier video, you actually need to challenge your body so it has to change. It's literally forced to change. Otherwise, you guessed it, it just remains the same, okay? And you get zero results, plus a healthy dose of frustration because you can't figure out why you're quote unquote working out but not seeing the results, right? So one way to challenge yourself is to use EP, and that's just a shorthand or an abbreviation for exercise progression. For example, with pressing or overhead lifts, you have your single military press, your double military press, your single push press, your double push press, your single jerk, and then your double jerk. Okay, for horizontal pulls, for lack of a better term, or kettlebell ballistics, horizontal ballistics, right? We've got 2-hand swing, 1-hand swing, and then hand-to-hand swing. And we can make those horizontal ballistics vertical by moving into the single clean, the single snatch. Okay, and obviously there's some other progressions there, which I'm sure you could figure out. Okay, but the point is each progression increases the skill and energy demand from your body. Now, that's the obvious EP, the external EP, as I like to call it. But there's a less obvious, practically hidden EP called internal EP, internal exercise progression. And that's where on each set, you focus on refining your technique by layering in cues that, 1, reduce or eliminate strength leaks, and 2, increase your power output. And you do that on each and every rep. Now, this requires more energy because you're using more muscle fibers. You're using more muscle fibers on each and every rep. Okay, hopefully as you progress and you refine your technique, it gets better and better and better. That's the way it should work anyway. So as a result of using more muscle fibers, you're doing more work and therefore more calories are burned. As an example, instead of doing the obligatory 10 swings, right, perform 10 swings this particular way. Use these 3 cues. Perform 10 swings where you push the floor down and away as hard as you can to stand up, right? That's the first cue. The second cue is, right, do 10 swings where you plank up or stand tall and brace your abs at the top of each swing, right? Not a super hard brace, but enough where you can tell they're contracting so you're not leaning back at the top of the swing, right? Potentially damaging or risking injuring your lower back. And number 3, right, perform 10 swings where you actively hike the kettlebell back under your legs instead of just letting it fall down from the top of the swing. And we call these overspeed eccentrics. Now, using any one of these cues you haven't used before will make each rep and every set more challenging. Combining all of them, right, can set your lazy metabolic furnace ablaze. Okay, so of course, there are more cues you can layer in here too for more explosive calorie crushing swings. But hopefully you get my point here. Now, I used swings as an example, but it applies to every kettlebell exercise, right? So which one do you start with? Which exercise progression do you start with? External or internal? Personally, I start with the internal, and that's because it makes skill acquisition, the external exercise progression, happen faster. And that way you get the best of all worlds, right? You get skill, which is maximizing the exercise performance. You get safety, right? Maximizing joint position and muscle mechanics. You get power output or increased power output, which is optimizing your work or optimizing your force production. And of course, you get increased caloric expenditure, which that's the logical conclusion from the 3 previous, right, bullet points there. More work equals more calories burned, right? Makes good sense, doesn't it? Okay, so how well does this internal EP or internal exercise progression work? Well, the other day I was on a Zoom call with a client and he'd run through one of my most popular programs called the Giant with a pair of 20s. And he had increased his capacity. In other words, his ability to do more and more and more reps with that pair of 20 kilo kettlebells. But he still could not press a pair of 24 kilo kettlebells, okay? Now, this is critically important because in theory, the more volume you can do, the more potential strength you have. Said another way, the more volume you do with a lighter intensity or percentage of your one repetition maximum, usually between 60 and 80%, or a little higher. Sometimes that range is 70 to 90%, right? The greater ease you have of, or greater potential you have of increasing your absolute or maximum strength. In other words, in theory, this guy should have been able to press a pair of 24s, okay? Because a pair of 20s is only 80% of the pair of 24s, okay? Following so far? All right. But again, he couldn't, which is why we were on the Zoom call. So I ran him through a very specific sequence of drills. And within about 45 minutes, he'd performed his first ever press with a pair of 24s. And his rate of perceived exertion was only about an 8 or 8.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. So since it was his first time, we would have expected it to be a true maximum, somewhere around a 9.5 or a 10. Now, what's really interesting about this gentleman is he's got a big aerobic motor, right? He's got an endurance running background, and he's very aerobically fit. Yet, while we were working through the internal EP drills, just 2 reps at a time, he was wiping away the sweat from his forehead. Now, that's fascinating to me because obviously that's a different type of work than his body's used to, right? It's that whole more work, more calories, especially a different type of work. What's also interesting is after showing people internal EP, exercise progression drills, for the last 15 years or so now, I've noticed that if you don't have a big aerobic motor like this gentleman did, you'll sweat and huff and puff even more while doing your reps. And that, of course, means that you're using more energy than you're used to using. And that presents itself as a challenge for your body to change, right? And so as a result, you're going to burn more calories than you normally would while you're training. And, good news is, depending on your effort levels, you'll probably burn a little bit more than normal afterwards as your body recovers from the training session, okay? So give this idea of internal exercise progression a shot with your current programming and let me know how you get on. And if you need some help with either external or internal exercise progression, I'll leave a link to some of my programs in the description below that could help you out. All right. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, click the like button, click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave me a comment. Have you played around with external EP, internal EP? And if so, what have your results been? All right. Until next time, my friend, stay strong.